Hello, hello. This is Trevor. Thank you for joining us today for an incredible conversation with an incredible human being. I want to, from the outset, thank Michael Barber for being open and transparent and authentic. This conversation is fascinating in its own right. We explore all kinds of issues, from walking along the precipice of your own life, walking through the threshold, what that does for you emotionally, physically, to tackling broader topics of self-awareness, including his experience as he accepted and then came out at the age of 31 after a long relationship with a woman that he had feelings for. So, my friends, sit back and learn from one of the literally premier enterprise marketers. I'm talking about the marketers that work with companies that are in the up to $30 billion top line revenue range. Yep, you heard that correct. Without further ado, sit back, relax, grab your pen and notebook, and listen to this wonderful conversation that I had with this man, Michael Barber.
Welcome, my friends, to the Trevor Chapman Show. This is Trevor. And this is our place, yours and mine, where we talk and learn from the best minds on this beautiful earth about entrepreneurship, achievement. We are purveyors of the good life, curating environments that promote and even demand Kairos moments of success, happiness, and euphoric achievement. I mean, we work relentlessly to attain levels of the highest performance in business and life. Here is to our collective happiness and to celebrating our human experience. My friends, it's time to run.
Welcome, my friends, to the Trevor Chapman Show. This is Trevor, and we are lucky today to have with us a fascinating character. Of the many podcasts that I have, this is number 3 today. I've got 2 more after this, multiple 2 days ago. Of all the podcasts, I've been most excited for this one, not to disparage any of the other interviews because they all shocked me, but just the interest surrounding this individual, for me at least, has been paramount. So, Michael Barber, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So to start off, can you give us the 60,000-foot broad overview of who you are, where you came from, potentially who you were at the beginning of your career, and what you're known for now?
For sure. So my name is Michael Barber. I'm the SVP and Chief Creative Officer at Godfrey. We are a B2B only shop. We were just acquired by Godfrey a couple of weeks ago. So this has been an interesting couple of weeks to have this conversation. Started my career at a very tiny agency in Phoenix that was run by a gentleman at that time that no one knew, Jay Baer. And Jay's turned out to be one of the biggest thought leaders in our space now 15, 16 years later. And when I started, it was a passion project. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And Jay happened to come along at a really interesting time. And I've been in the business ever since.
Love that, man. So when you say you've been in the business, for people not familiar, in the business of what?
In the business, the agency business, so advertising agency, largely with firms that specialize in digital projects. So we're talking anything from digital customer experience through web application development, search, and social.
Gotcha. So as an individual, so on your career level, you're a competitor potentially, like my audience will know VaynerMedia. You're a competitor with Gary Vaynerchuk, correct?
Yes, you would say that if we were in the sort of consumer space, but Godfrey largely plays in what we would refer to as the business to business space. So we're helping largely mid-market industrial manufacturers. So those organizations that are doing anywhere from about 50 to 250, about 50 million to about 250 to about $30 billion in revenue as a mid-market enterprise for us.
Isn't that hilarious that you call that a mid-market enterprise? I remember early on, I had some success. This is before 2008, so before I had my head knocked by a 2x4. But I was like, yeah, I'm a small business owner. And then I looked up the definition, and a small business is from 50 million top line to like $500 million top line.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not a small business.
Exactly.
So personally, I've read about you. Talk a little bit about that moment that kind of defined you during the race, and a little bit more in depth in that, and then we'll kind of walk down the path of great conversation.
For sure. So the race you're talking about is Hood to Coast. Over the last 5 or 6 years, one of the biggest things I've been focused on is my health. And that race was sort of the accumulation of a major change in my life. I lost about 112 pounds at that point. Went to race what is one of the most grueling group races in the world, which is Hood to Coast. If you aren't familiar, you go from the top of Mount Hood, which sits the base of that mountain, sits at about 8,000 feet in Oregon, and you run there for 199 miles over about 34 hours to the coast, the Pacific Ocean of Oregon. And the moment you're talking about was the last leg that I was tasked with running. So we are about 36 hours without sleep at this point. And I am on mile 24, cresting over a 1,600-foot climb. And it was one of those moments where you question everything in your life. What are you doing? Why am I here? Your body doesn't know what it's doing. Your mind doesn't know what it's doing. And I affectionately refer to it as that moment when you know where your limits are, where you at the bottom in terms of physically being drained and mentally being drained. It's also, when I say affectionately, it is the moment where you understand your limits are. And that is both a reassuring moment and also a scary one. It's reassuring to know that you can get to that place, and also scary to know, well, can I keep pushing? Is there something beyond this limit? But that was the moment. That was that deep, dark moment where you're questioning everything physically and mentally about yourself.
So is this beyond the moment where you're looking for a route to trip on and accidentally break your ankle? How far beyond that point is this?
Oh, this is well beyond it. I mean, this is the point where you are putting any pain that your body is going through. And at this point, I had a swollen knee and a swollen ankle from just blood not draining off it from the last 10 miles that had been done 8 hours before that particular peak. So this is the moment where you just put literally all emotional and physical pain past you, and you just keep putting one foot in front of the other to just get the race done.
So I think very rarely now we have to engineer these situations. This was common during our days of tribalism, but now we deliberately engineer moments of extremity because we don't typically, at least physically, we don't experience them today. So describe, what is it that actually occurred in your brain during those moments, like during this extended period of touching and embracing and potentially walking through the threshold of your limit? Well, what occurs?
I think it's both an emotional and a physical pain. And it's a sense in an emotional pain where you don't know what to process next. I think when you're going through life in a day-to-day manner and not pushing yourself up against these extremes, you're rarely tested to understand what should I do now, both physically and mentally. And for me, it was a question of, this is an understanding of where those limits are. And getting that in a manufactured way, as you've stated, is something we rarely get in a day-to-day situation, because those high-stakes moments are fewer and far between, depending on what you're doing in your day. And so for me, it was a realization that these are limits that are there. It's also a realization that you can push a lot further than you ever think you can go. And I don't think people, when they're looking at a task or they're looking at a project or they're looking at a moment in their life, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a professional moment, it can be a personal moment, we tend to worry largely about all of those little things that have to happen to accomplish the larger stated goal. And don't allow ourselves to put one step in front of the other, or at least check a box if it's some project we're working on. And when you get to those end limits, you understand that it is really just about, for lack of a better way of putting it, one step in front of the other, regardless of the challenges that are in front of you, whether those challenges are personal or professional. It is about taking that next step every single day and not stopping.
We're singing harmony. Every year my kids, once they reach the age of 7, for my son, it was 6, I take them on a rite of passage trip. And it's funny because the trips I take my daughters on are entirely different than my oldest son. I have another son. He's too young though. Anyway, when he was 6, we trekked into Choqquequirau. It was 5 days in, old Incan trails. The only time I actually thought I was going to have a heart attack was pulling him across this old mining cable because the bridge had been wiped out. There's no infrastructure. And just random maps that I had a buddy put together. Anyway, long story short, I won't go into the story of that, but I will go into the story of each time I take him on a rite of passage trip, we're climbing. And the reason why is because for me, I grew up climbing. And I had major breakthroughs in my own life through climbing. I understood many things, some of which that I want him to learn are that it is an impossible feeling to experience standing at the base of a mountain, all the preparation, you're excited. And then when you stand down and you truly see high up you're going, if you're even seeing the summit, most of the time it's 20 or 30 false summits, but you're looking up and you question, how are we ever going to get up there in the time that we have? And you see someone way further than you, and you say, man, there's the concept of I should be where they're at, but they started before me. And ultimately, it comes down to exactly what you said, just placing one foot in front of the other. Last October, I got pulmonary edema on Kilimanjaro. I was already sick when we went there. It was about 45 minutes from the top. I have no recollection of it. He was with me. And luckily we had guides with us. They don't allow you to climb without it. But I've seen such transformation with him being in those instances where as a young man, this isn't something necessary. He doesn't have to climb Kilimanjaro or Mount Blanc or any of these places we've been. But he's learned, and I'm so grateful that he's learned that it simply does not matter how fast you go. It is simply putting one foot in front of the other and following that pattern over and over will eventually, if right, it will take you to the summit and back down again.
It is so true. I don't know if you're familiar, but Allison Levine, who is a fellow speaker and mountaineer, has climbed Everest twice, and she talks about these moments in her book On the Edge about how the ascent, the looking up and thinking, how do we get there, and a deep appreciation for that one step in front of the other, and how all those physicality moments that we have when we're doing something that pushes us to that edge, they apply in literally every other situation of our life. And I think those lessons that you're giving for your son and these lessons of that you can take away from really treacherous physical circumstances help apply in everyday decision making, whether we're doing that in a conference room or we're having a conversation with a team member or we're having a conversation with our partner.
Well, so tactically, following your experience in that last leg there, what changed in your day-to-day? Obviously, you can go through an incredible emotional and spiritual and like these cosmic warps when you touch your limit and walk through the threshold. But this is all internal. So tactically, what changed for you after going through this?
This is a really good question. I think for me, it was largely two things. On a tactical level, you stop worrying about all of the little bumps in any day-to-day part of your life. Especially when you are dealing, whether it's a personal relationship or a relationship you have with your boss or with a colleague or a coworker, you worry less about the little bumps in the road that come along. They just don't become bumps anymore. I think also at a tactical level is that you look at execution a lot easier in the sense that you no longer sit in a meeting or a conversation and allow those conversations to go in circles. You are always aiming towards what the objective of this conversation or this engagement or this interaction is with an individual. And I say that in a very purposeful way. I think, coming out of those experiences from that objective perspective, you very quickly learn that any interaction you're having with a human, you begin to understand very quickly that you get to an objective that you're trying to accomplish with that individual or that set of individuals within your team or a group of people you're talking to very quickly, a lot quicker than you used to. And so for me, it's been those two things. It's that the bumps are very fewer and far between, and understanding the objective when you're having an interaction with another person.
So one of the things that I find really fascinating, and this goes right in line with what you just said, I love it, is eventually after bouncing here and there, I stuck with philosophy in college. And one of the things, specifically the Stoics, really impacted me. And we call it negative visualization now, but it's walking down the rabbit hole of a bad experience that has not yet occurred, which may occur, to the point where you feel the emotion. And it does two things. It helps you appreciate this fleeting moment right now to the utmost. Everything is just one giant happy accident. It all could leave in some dramatic meteorite crash. Like, who knows, right? And so you appreciate the moment in the moment, but also if the worst does happen, it doesn't blindside you. You're able to deal with those things. And so what I find fascinating is that we are an animal that is self-aware of the fact that we're self-aware. We don't just innately run away from death. We literally contemplate our own deaths. And that's unique. This isn't something that occurs, as far as we know, outside of our species. So for the people that are listening who have not walked upon the precipice like you have, who are listening, how would you illustrate in a paragraph the emotional transformation that they should go through if they're not going to go from hood to coast? What could they potentially, how impactful could you describe this moment so that they potentially could reap at least a portion of the benefit that you've reaped from actually experiencing this? Is that understandable?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the emotional benefit, if you will, is whether you can have these experiences in your life or not, because there's going to be listeners that aren't going to have these opportunities, is a fundamentally an understanding that there are challenges that you can face, big or small, in any day of your life, where you can begin to understand the breadth of those opportunities, whether they are big or small, and begin to categorize them, almost put them in boxes, if you will, so that you can understand the impact that those are having. And I think if we can understand that there are small things happening that we don't have to necessarily build into larger issues or larger instances, and worry about the larger things that we may be facing as an individual, or our families or our children are facing at any given moment, will allow us to focus on, and our energy on, those opportunities versus focusing on the little things that are happening around them. And I think that's something anyone can learn, regardless if you're pushing yourself physically up a mountain or down a mountain. In my perspective, or in my case, is just allowing yourself to experience the larger things rather than the smaller little bumps that we go through on a daily basis.
So why health? You said over the last 4 years, you really started to focus on your health. What was that catalyst?
It was really two things. One, there were 3 individuals in my life that passed away for any number of reasons. And I came off a stage in Denver about 5 years ago and looked at myself in the mirror. And the person that I saw was not the person that I thought I was. And so this was a realization of, if you want to be around and be you, then you have to make some changes.
So it was one dramatic moment. You realized that, and then was it easy? I ask because I'm in that moment right now where I'm looking at myself in the mirror and on video, and I'm like, dude, that's not me. Dude, what actually happened was I was in this article on time.com, and they illustrated me, and I said, that's not me. And then I looked at the photo and I was like, dude, that is me. Mm-hmm. I was like, are you kidding me? This is not the good looking fellow I once was. And so I'm going through this transformation right now. So I'm asking selfishly, like, what did you do? How did you do it? All of the above.
Well, it was, for me, it was 2 particular things. It was one, understanding that you make 0 excuses in this process, in terms of physical exercise. And for me, it was a weight issue. I didn't think I was less handsome because I had weight. It was purely a health issue, right? And so for me, it was pulling away the excuses, and those excuses including anything from, as an entrepreneur and as a member of a really high performing team, you put any number of barriers in your way to not exercise. These are things like, well, I've been on a plane all day, I'm exhausted. Well, I've been up 20 hours. I've put enough steps in front of myself today to not have to go exercise. I have been working so many hours. I've done everything I possibly can do to get that to feel like I've accomplished enough today. It was putting all of those excuses aside every single day and knowing that I am going to do something physically for a fairly significant amount of time, no matter what is in the way. And I think that is probably the single best tactic that anybody can do to improve physical health, is get away from the little excuses, especially when you are an executive or an entrepreneur or a business owner, because we allow ourselves to have any number of excuses to dictate where our physical health goes. And you have to, regardless if you've been on a flight for 8 hours and then walked into a meeting for a couple, regardless of if you've worked 20 hours, is you have to get into that hotel gym, or you get into your local gym, or you simply do some exercise in the 6 square foot box that is around you. You have to make those changes on a daily basis. It was number 2, was making very, very conscious decisions about what I was putting in my mouth, in terms of understanding the health benefits of the food that was going in on a daily basis, and also understanding, realizing that food is simply an energy driver in your body. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that you lean on to feel good in any given moment. And that's a key distinction for someone that loves food like I do. Viewing it as functional over viewing it as a necessity is a very different paradigm. So for me, it was those two things. It was not making any excuses to actually get out and do something every single day. And 2, understanding that what I was putting in my body can taste good, but it needs to be functional over anything simply than just being simply tasting good.
That's awesome. So how about caffeine? Do you drink or take caffeine?
I do, yes. So I have 1 cup of coffee a day. I have 1 cold brew, usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 16 ounces. And that's my kicker during the day. And then if I'm going in to do an intense workout, I will usually take some sort of green tea extract or have a cup of tea before I hit the gym. But I am by no means am I a serial abuser of caffeine.
And were you prior to the last 4 years?
It was certainly more excessive than what it is now. Yes. I think most of my energy these days comes from simply getting in the gym and keeping that metabolism up as high as possible.
I find it so fascinating, and the way I describe this is how it makes sense to me, so I hope it translates, but I found this interesting duality, and that's that the most desirable things in life are camouflaged in virtue of themselves, and this is what I mean by that. If I'm tired, it would be logical for me to lay down on the couch, get some rest, eat some potato chips, watch some TV. But after that activity, I am even more fatigued. Or if I am not happy and I want to be happy, it would be logical to say me, I. And it is in doing the counterintuitive thing. You're tired, so instead of resting, you go to the gym and exhaust yourself. And if you are unhappy, focusing on the happiness of others and not yourself, that you find the very thing that you seek. And it's this fascinating approach, I think. I discovered it at the end of 2008, when for me everything was falling apart, and it was the I thing where I could not comprehend why nothing I did worked. Everything I had come from everything I did working, and frankly not having to try that hard, to no matter how hard I tried, nothing working. And so I interviewed this guy, Brandon Hampton. He's a social media guy. He's got, at CEO on Twitter, at Money. He does all kinds of media buying and stuff for influencers and everything. And he talked about those dark days. His 2008 was also 2008. But for 4 years after 2008, he didn't recover. He was in the house playing video games, wouldn't leave or anything. It was just a really hard time. For years, I think it was viewed as not masculine to talk about those either short or prolonged periods of weakness. where it's like, man, I'm being attacked by sadness, depression, and all these things. I think only now it's becoming, people are opening up, being transparent and vulnerable about it. For me, 2008 was horrendous, culminating in me being curled up on the ground in the fetal position because I allowed my conditions to determine how I was feeling, not my decisions. When was your 2008?
My 2008 was, let's see here, it would have been 2012 was my 2008 for you, comparatively to you. And that was a time where I realized, one, the physical elements, not understanding what I was doing, not understanding who I was, because every time I looked in the mirror, this was not the individual that I thought I should have been looking at. It was a deep realization that there was things that I had not discovered about myself. And it was a questioning of, am I doing something that's going to leave a legacy behind? And on that point, the reason why that was occurring at that year is my mom and dad had recently sold their company that they'd built over the course of about 30 years. And there was a very deep appreciation from me that they had left something behind for our family to be known for a long time that impacted people well beyond my sister, myself, and the rest of the extended family. And it was that realization, are you doing the right things to leave a legacy behind? And are you proud of the person that you are going through and building that legacy? And the answers to both of those questions were no. And so that was the year that there was a lot of searching and figuring out, how do I change those things? And I've spent a good amount of time fixing, I think, both of those challenges. And it's a continual exploration of coming out of that 2012, or in your case, that 2008 darkness. It's not something that ever goes away. It's something that sits just as a tiny little prick on the back of your mind and keeps you motivated. It keeps you, it allows you to get off that couch when you are uber tired and get into the gym. It stops you from putting the easy stuff in your mouth as you're traveling and you're on the third segment of the day on an airplane. It gets you to get up on stage and deliver something that's going to impact someone in the audience. It allows you to be calm when you're going through a very stressful decision-making process for your team. It's just a lens that sits there in the back of your mind so that you can hopefully be a better individual as you're going through all these different instances or all these different experiences in your life.
So why is it that you think we go through this period where legacy is so important? And it seems to be, at least in my experience, which is very limited, but in my experience nonetheless, I find that men go through this period of legacy. Is it because we don't experience childbirth, and so we don't have an actual, obviously, the children can be ours, but we don't physically experience the sensation of childbirth. And so we're like, what is my legacy? To you, what is it? Because I find legacy fascinating. I am driven by legacy, but for years, I was not driven by legacy. I was driven by necessity. I was driven by comfort. I was driven by, the fleeting sensation of happiness. But legacy it's really important to me right now in my life. So why do you think we have this desire, this magnetism towards it?
It's the fact that when we leave this earth, however that happens, that there's going to be something that someone remembers us by. It is a deep, very deep fear that once your time is done, there's nothing left with your name on it. That the last utterance of your name will be perhaps on the certificate that confirms that you're dead, or your funeral, or whatever that remembrance is. It is this need to extend the feelings that we gave people, or something that we gave an individual or a group of people, that will outlast us well beyond that time. And I think it's really something that's, for a lot of us, it's something that's only started to be talked about, that we really forgot about through sort of this if for lack of a better term, .com internet age, because we have been so hyper focused on the cycles of technology or the cycles of news that's been, sped up by technological innovation, if you will, is that we are so attuned to winning in the short term that we often have forgotten that we have a decent chunk of time on this earth, and hopefully we leave something behind that is not fleeting, that is impactful. And I think that we have a very keen sense of that these days. And when I say these days, I mean that in a very short relative period, because it's this idea of legacy, and people have started talking about legacy more than ever in the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years than we talked about it for the last 20 or 30. And if anything, it to me, it feels like a very positive step forward that we're actually even talking about this idea of legacy, because hopefully it will remind people that there's a longer game here that we should be playing on a regular basis than on the 15-second stories that are going on our Instagram profile or on the 250 characters that are in our tweet. That there is something else that is at work here that we need to be worried about.
So how much of this concept of legacy, how does that impact the massive business decisions that you make? I'm talking about the biggest ones, the 1 or 2 decisions a year that fundamentally change the direction you're going. Do you consider personal legacy when you look at those decisions? Oh,
100%. Your legacy is not only, it is at the end of the day for me, because I don't think very few of us will leave something behind that will extend hundreds and hundreds of years. It's the feelings that you will leave behind in the path of your wake. And that hopefully those feelings are positive ones, that you have moved someone's life forward, whether emotionally, physically, or career-wise, in a positive direction. It is, for lack of a better way of explaining it, it's something that any one of us, especially within those big decision-making moments, needs to be concerned about. Because if we are going to understand that these are the big moments in our life where we are making a decision that are going to impact not only just us, but potentially so many additional people that count on us, that count on what those decisions are going to do, we have to have at least a very broad view of the impact that those decisions are going to make. And for me, the largest one that's come in the last year was deciding to join an organization. I had no interest in joining a team until the conversation came to fruition and we looked at what that would look like. And that was a defining moment. Was, are you going to give up independence? Are you going to give up the namesake that you have built an organization on, in the idea that there is a greater opportunity to impact more individuals, or impact more work, or impact and make a change within an organization that will last fundamentally well beyond the time that you are there?
That's fascinating. So I want to ask more of this ethereal question that I really enjoy. It's something I ask myself because it helps me understand as a divorced observer of my own actions. It helps me see myself more clearly. And I like to ask people who are entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial about this, or this very question. Here it is. How much of your desires have truly been your desire, and how much have been what you thought you were just supposed to desire?
This is an interesting question for me. If you were to have asked me this question 3-4 years ago, prior to that 2012 moments for your 2008 moments, they were a desire of what others would have appreciated of me. But since then, it has been a desire of what I have needed to make myself happy. Because what I have ultimately learned is that if I am happy unto myself of who I am and who I stand for and what I get to do every single day, then I know that I am that desire that I'm going after is pure at heart. It is not something that somebody else informs, or it's not something else that is driven by anything more than me making myself happy. And for me, that is the lens when I look at this idea of desire. Because if I'm able to truly be happy with who I am as an individual and be happy with the interactions that I have on a daily basis, with the work that I get to do on a daily basis, that the desires that I do truly hope that they're coming from a place of being informed by what I need over what I think others need of me.
Interesting. So you keep bringing up happiness. So that's like this term, I think for different people, it means different things. I was a purveyor of happiness for years and years and years. And it's so funny. Oh man, I wish I had it. It was either on the plane yesterday. Somewhere I read this quote about the elusive nature of happiness. I'm going to butcher it, so I'm not even going to bring it up. But for me, happiness is two things. It's peace of mind. Which is easiest to explain by saying what it's not. When you did something bad at school and you know the principal was going to tell your parents that day, when you're walking home, that is the opposite of peace of mind. So it's peace of mind and tranquility, prolonged peace, prolonged okayness. That's I found that I can experience those two states of being and potentially not be engaged in the most incredible project of the moment, or be engaged in it, but be engaged in the small details that aren't amusing. And I experience a well-being and content feeling of just good emotion. So for you, what is happiness? Like what does that mean?
For me, happiness is really two things. It's a belief that, oh man, this is one of those tough ones.
Yeah. It's
For
like
me,
the plague of civilization. You know, we seek it and it's like, what is it?
For me, I will say it is probably centered around three things. It is this idea of challenge, that I am not sitting waiting for the next challenge, because I find myself that if there is not something that's occurring that's getting my brain thinking both right and left sides, I am not as happy. I tend to sit back in situations. And when I sit back, I don't find myself feeling those innate feelings of happiness that we should have. So it's knowing that there's a challenge that's going on in my life, whether that is physically and getting through things from a health wise, whether that is organizationally, what's happening with my team, the work that we are working on, that it is challenging, that it helps move our senses forward. Because for any creative, they will tell you that challenge is an important part of everything that we do. It would be that. It would be a feeling of challenge. The second, it would be a feeling that I am doing okay. And this is very elusive, and it's going to be very vague, but it's something that works for me. Is that I think constantly we worry about our state of our state. How would I describe this in a way that is not just my definition, but applies? The state of okay is just that I am in the moment and I am doing that. Everything is, it's almost a lens of safety, if you will, that the world around is, I'm not describing this well at all.
Slippery slope of language. My friend Jesse Elder calls it the slippery slope of language, when you can't, where it's these outside emotions that we have not yet been able to express, eloquently in words. So I get it.
Did we lose you?
No, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. You went out for just a second. My apologies.
Gotcha. No, so what I was saying is it's the my friend Jesse Elder calls it the slippery slope of language, where these emotions that we experience, we have not yet created language that can express the transcendental. And that's, I think that maybe that describes what you're trying to describe with the state of okay. Is that what do you mean by that?
I think it is. I think it's the state that you are doing okay at any given moment, because the better way to describe this is we are often setting such lofty expectations of ourselves that there are moments where we fail to meet even those little lofty explanations. And it could be that it is Friday afternoon after a grueling week and we are recording a podcast on conversations that should be deep and meaningful. And in my instance, I am failing to articulate those feelings. But that feeling that we are doing okay in the moment is a state of, is something that contributes to this idea of happiness to me. And the third thing beyond just this idea of challenge and being okay in the moment for me is my family. I draw a tremendous amount of happiness from from how they are doing. Because we are a very odd, cohesive, and loving group of people that I have not seen in other families before, and so I derive it from them, which is an interesting thing because it's a very difficult situation for yourself to derive this feeling of happy from other people. It's not something you should be doing, but they are the people that power me and that make me tick. And so in some sense, they are certainly drivers of that happiness.
I love that, man. And the state of okay. So I've never heard that, but as you say it, it articulates this undertow that I experience when for instance, 2 days ago, I was not in a state of okay. I felt like I was spinning my wheels, and it was not that. And I remember I went to bed. I told my wife, I was like, man, I don't know what it is. It's like something, it's hard to describe. My parents used to say, they both lived in Japan for a while. They spoke Japanese. I grew up in Guam because they hit Guam during the big Japanese tourism era, and they would call it a fuon. And it's some Japanese word that has, as you're a child, you create these identities that you attach to sounds that we make with our mouths and our vocal cords. And I had a fuon. I don't even know what that means, because I'm sure it means something different actually in Japanese, but that's incredible. As you were talking about challenge, I love that, man. It made me recall this quote that I looked up while you were talking. I just want to share it because for me, as a teenager, this was able to kind of encapsulate what we search for identities, especially when we're younger. This was it for me. This is by James Ramsey Ullman. He's a mountaineer. He said, challenge is the core and mainspring of all human activity. If there's an ocean, we cross it. If there's a disease, we cure it. If there's a wrong, we right it. If there's a record, we break it. And finally, if there's a mountain, we climb it. And so you are drawn to challenge. And if there's not challenge, then something is not okay. Is that accurate?
That is very accurate. That quote is spot on and describes exactly, I think, what drives my feeling of happiness is those sorts of opportunities.
Dude, it's so funny because someone once told me, and this is so true, life has a way of getting at you either by everything happening at once or nothing happening at once. And it's so bad. When nothing is happening at once, that's harder than everything happening at once. At least it is for me. And man, I love how you put those three things in, because I think they really are critical. So kind of tapering down off the conversation. I want to touch on a subject that I hope is okay that we walk into that. And that's that you came out when you were 31.
Yeah.
And you said that it's odd and it's strange because it's something that I think because it was so late in life. Is that why you said that, or what? Why did you describe it as, I don't remember the exact words that you used, but odd because you were 31? So what do you mean by that?
Odd because I was 31. It's certainly late in life, but I'd had a long relationship with a woman. And so it was odd on those levels. It was the physicality changes for me were, and that realization in Denver was a moment of, there is another person here that you haven't figured out who that individual is. And so beyond just the physical changes, there was an entire layer, and we've touched on a little bit of these emotional changes that occurred as I physically became who I thought I was, and the challenge of doing things like coming down an 8,000-foot mountain for 199 miles. And those are moments when you have, when you're getting through those deep physical moments where you question everything about who you are as an individual. And I began to do that as I was changing physically. And so it is a very pointed moment in my life when I did come out, and coming out at that age is always an interesting moment, I think, for someone, especially given, where we are as a society and our feelings towards LGBTQ relationships.
Well, I mean, thank goodness that it was, now and not 10, 15 years ago. I remember growing up and it was not I think we're the same age. In high school, it would have been a very bad experience, to come out in high school, at least in the high school that I was in. So tell me then, was it this sudden realization, or was it because your physical body was so broken down that you were able to no longer, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's that what we think we're supposed to desire and we desire, and your body's so crumbled that it's just like, no, this is what it is. What happened? Was it sudden? Was it an acceptance? How did that go?
It was an acceptance. I will tell you that the single thing that I've always wanted to be in my life is a dad. You can ask my mom this. I have wanted to, I think I was put on this earth to be a dad. And that lens of, let me back up and say that my mom will tell you that when I was 5 or 6, people would ask me what I wanted to be. And you never heard the token doctor, lawyer, race car driver. I'd be like, I want to be a dad. And that was something that never went away. And I think for me, that colored along with some really deep emotional pain as I grew up and went through that time when you should be figuring yourself out, that 12 to 22, 25-ish period. And I think for any man, it's really up to the age of 30, is I didn't give myself a chance to get to know who I was because I was trying to do something and be someone for the sake of an outcome that could only happen, I thought in my mind as I grew up, being straight. And so that was the lens. And so it was, I think I covered up those feelings and those emotions and those wantings and those needs because I wanted to be something that I didn't think could happen. And inevitably after doing that, your entire adult life, for me, it was looking in a mirror and realizing that the person that I was looking at was not who I was. And so for me, it was a gradual acceptance. I feel it was likely always there, but I didn't give myself the chance to get to know who that person was. I just decided to mask it with any number of things, like get into relationships with people that I shouldn't have, and make decisions that I shouldn't have.
That's fascinating. I can't remember who said it, but somebody said later on in life towards their death that a man doesn't show his true face until after 40. Up until then, he's got this mask on. And man, that's, all the respect and honor for being able to unmask that so much earlier. How did you cope with telling people, especially since you, at the time, were you in that long relationship with that lady?
Yes, I was. Yep.
What happened? How did that go down?
It did not go down well. There's no easy way to put it. And, but the difference is getting to know who you are allows you to, it gives you so much more strength and the ability to say, this is who I am. And so although it was a deeply painful moment of going through that experience with that other individual, it was also a realization that if I can have that conversation with her, that I could have that conversation with anyone. And it gave me the ability to, have that conversation with all different people in all different parts of my life that, I didn't think I had, the strength to do that. But when you figure out who you are, when you figure out that true self, it gives you a tremendous amount of strength to say things about who you are to people that you didn't think you could say them to, much more easily than it did when you were looking on the other side of that conversation.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Well, so as you say that, I'm visual, so I see images. And what I see is I wish right now I could sit here in the chair I'm sitting in and hook some sort of hose to my head and suck in the experiences that you've gone through, because I think that is a moment in life, what you went through. I think very few people are able to actually experience the raw, untethered, true, transparent self-awareness. And man, if I could just suck that experience into me, I would be. I think it would just be so valuable for everyone to go through. The closest thing, we had a couple really close experiences. So my wife almost died a few years ago during a miscarriage, and it was horrendous. And like a year before that, we were on the JMT and we did, 117 miles in 4 days. And the last day we got held up and all this stuff was happening and there were bears on the trail. We went 37 miles in a day. And during that day, she had something happen with her lungs. We weren't so high that she was getting pulmonary edema, but she had been sick prior. And I literally thought that, we had no reception, nothing. There was no one on the trail. I hadn't seen anyone for days. And I had my knife out. Like I literally thought I was going to have to, I don't know. Like I had no clue what I had to do. Stab her in her lungs and try and pull some, weird medical thing where I drain it. It's those moments of it's what you opened with, stepping and touching the threshold and passing through, that so magnificently define us. And I think life is so easy now that we rarely have to do that. So, and that is just fascinating. Does it fill you with a sense of substance, like inside? I don't know how else to describe moments like that other than afterwards. I feel like I have substance, something more than just hollowness. Like how do you describe it?
It is substance. It is also a sense of calm for me. And I say that in a very broad brush stroke. We are, for lack of a better way of putting it, a frenetic species. And I find often that we don't take the time to just calm ourselves and understand, again, back to this point of one step in front of the other to accomplish something. We are constantly looking for the shortcut to get there. And the fact of the matter is there are no shortcuts. This is a long slog to an end, but a sense of substance and calm allows you to enjoy that slog, which is a horrible term to say. When I'm hearing it to myself, it allows you to enjoy that slog, which it is not, a lot better, I think, at the moments in between. But for me, it was a sense of calm, because you can sit back and enjoy the experiences that are happening in your day-to-day life, whether that's a casual conversation with a colleague, whether that's, how was your day with your significant other, or whether that's debating the merits of a marketing tactic with a client. There is a sense of calm and confidence and substance in what you do when you are able to have those moments of precipice, more than you did before that moment that you stepped through it.
Dude, that's incredible. So let's end with this question, and this may take a moment to reflect. So I will ask the question, and then I will explain for me what it is. And that is, I attempt to be as self-aware as I can, because I think that not only will I be able to leave a legacy if I'm self-aware, the legacy I leave will be the proper one. It will be the right one. It will impact people how I would hope to impact them. Now, having said that, as I've become more self-aware and being able to say things about me that I once thought I wasn't supposed to because it's not popular or whatever, I'm just now open. I'm like, look, it is what it is. For years, I tried to change this. For years, I tried to pretend this wasn't the case. But here's the question, and then here's my explanation. What driving trait or attribute or thing about your character, or whatever you would call your intelligence, the being of Michael, what is it that is significant in the sense that a lot of your actions are based on it, but that you're almost ashamed of, either because socially it's unacceptable or innately you think that it's wrong? So here, for me, it's this. I'm driven by significance. And for many years, I said, no, that's pride. We're not supposed to be prideful. We're supposed to be humble. But I am. I'm driven by significance. I have a double-edged sword. I either want to walk through the airport and be completely anonymous, or I want to be stopped 6 or 10 times and have people take selfies with me. And it sounds so shallow. Man, it sounds so hollow. Even as I say it to you, like, honestly, I'm embarrassed to admit it. Like, I'm embarrassed to say that I am driven by significance, because it almost undermines the things I do. Then my audience is like, oh, well, he just wants to be famous. And it's not that. It's something, it's not that, oh, I want to be famous. It is a sense that what I am doing is more important than just the level of satisfaction that it provides for me. I want to be significant to others, but I am embarrassed of the fact that I seek significance. What is that for you?
So for me, similar to you, a term that I would use beyond this idea of significance would be recognition. It is, there is, I'm not going to lie that I don't derive a ton of pleasure in seeing myself recognized in a conference manual, or on a big screen in front of 4,000 or 5,000 people, or with a title that comes after it that says SVP CCO. Yeah. It is recognition. There is a driver that sits behind me for any number of reasons, that is definitely extremely selfish, but extremely self-aware in the sense that recognition allows you to impact and provide impact in places that you believe are the right places that will hopefully define your legacy or what you leave behind. And so for me, although that recognition and being a driving force feels like from any other place minus my head, a very selfish and conceited, and any number of additional adjectives that you could put with it, outwardly, inwardly for me, it allows impact. It allows the ability to stand in a room and make a statement or make a change for myself, my team, my family, with more weight than maybe what another individual may not be able to carry. And that is something that in the right hands, in the hands that wants to leave something good behind, in the hands that is truly defining themselves by what's left behind, what are the feelings that are left behind, the positive feelings that are left behind, it is something that I think is very powerful. So my word would be recognition, and an understanding that it is certainly something I think from a public perspective, from anybody else's head than mine, it does sound very similar, at least in tone, and at least in a similar fashion of significance. But what it allows is an impact, an ability to make that impact, and hopefully 100% of the time that impact is the right thing to be doing. And without it, we wouldn't be able to make that impact.
Man, Michael, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate just the transparency, the authenticity. Where can people find you online, and how can they best engage with you?
At Michael J. Barber. That's Michael J. Barber, Barber, anywhere online. And I am a phone call kind of guy. So if you connect with me online, I am more than happy to give you my cell phone. And I am more conversation driven, I think, than any other medium. But I'm more than happy to have a conversation on all the biggies, whether that's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram.
Awesome. Hey, Michael, thank you so much, man. Let's circle back around maybe 120 days or so and have another conversation. Are you cool with that?
I would love to do that.
Thank you so much. All right. Michael, thank you. And audience, thank you. We will see you tomorrow on iTunes, The Trevor Chapman Show.